Welcome back to the Mostly Legal Podcast, a show where we tell the stories of people who make law firms operate. I'm Amanda Copeless, Chief Operating Officer at Sheffield, Lohman & Wilson.
And I'm Rob Joyner, Senior Vice President of Business Development at Centerbase.
If you've ever struggled with how to modernize your firm, or you've wondered whether legal administrators should really be called non-lawyers, this episode is for you.
Today, we're talking with John Bowers, CEO of Thompson Burton, a mid-sized firm based in Nashville. John is one of those rare law firm leaders who speaks candidly and with a little edge about what's holding firms back and what it really takes to run a forward-thinking practice.
We'll get into everything from law firm compensation models to why legal support staff deserve the same mental health resources as attorneys. We talk about his work with the Future Readiness Advisory Council of the Association of Legal Administrators and the incredible impact of the Loved Jenny movement.
John calls himself a proud non-lawyer, and after this conversation, you'll understand exactly why that's a badge of honor and why the business side of law deserves a louder voice.
Let's dive in. Today, we are talking to John Bowers. John is the CEO of Thompson Burton, which is a law firm, mid-sized firm. You're based in Nashville, and we don't read bios on this show. We let you tell your own story, so dive right in.
Thanks, Amanda. Thanks, Rob. And thanks to Centerbase for hosting this. Happy to be on the podcast. In fact, flattered a bit.
We're not that big of a deal.
I know.
No, it's growing. It's a big deal.
We have fans. Go ahead.
Plenty of followers.
Yes.
A following base, one might say. I am CEO of Thompson Burton. It's a great law firm, a little bit different than your traditional law firm, and we may get into that in a bit. My career started in the accounts payable department of an AmLaw 200 firm. I ended up transitioning into business development shortly thereafter and ran business development teams for 16 years for AmLaw 100 firms in the greater Philadelphia, New York area. Then a friend of mine said, the marketing and business development stuff is crap, which I don't believe it is. But he shot me a job opening for a job in Nashville to be the COO of an intellectual property boutique, which was the beginning of my time down in the South, which has been a great move for me and the family. I have been in law firm administration ever since. It's been, I guess, 9 years now doing that. So 25 years total in law and enjoying it still.
Hey, John, it's not my turn to ask a question, but I'm going to ask anyway. So you said New York and Philly. Where's your football allegiance?
Well, as anybody who's not from the South knows, football happens on Sunday. In the South, football happens on Saturday.
Very true.
So, of course, my allegiances, having grown up in New England, are with the Patriots, which was pretty awesome for about 20 years. But what a lot of folks don't realize is that those awesome 20 years followed about 15 years of sheer heartache.
Right.
Rob's a Cowboys fan. He can relate.
I am, and I'm just glad you didn't say the Eagles, the Giants. I can deal with the Patriots.
Excellent. Well, I respect that.
So, John, one of the other things that you describe yourself as is a proud non-lawyer. Mm-hmm. And, we talked before about how there's been a push for a while to stop using the term non-lawyer because it can be derogatory in nature. But you have an opposite opinion of that.
I do. The first time I ran into the idea that being a non-lawyer was negative was actually within a group of lawyers. I have been a member of the American Bar Association for 17 years now, and an associate member since I am a non-lawyer, if I could use the N-word. But I will say I was shocked and amazed when they were like, isn't there another way you could put that? Like, couldn't you just say that you're a staffer or a business development guy? And I was like, okay. And then I was like, well, why? And they're like, well, it's derogatory. And so I was like, okay, fine. I'll make it proud. So to try to please people, I started saying I was a proud non-lawyer, all the time knowing that it was kind of twisting the knife. And so I usually trot that out loudly and repeatedly in groups of lawyers mostly. Amongst those of us in ALA, I trot it out a little bit less because some people are a little bit offended by it. The point being, in medicine, no one says, "Oh, here are the non-doctors."
Right.
Yes.
And I can, while I can respect that, my point is that I am not a lawyer by choice. And those of us who have been in the industry for a long time have had opportunities and have very specifically and intentionally remained business people.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
And so I like to trot that out because it gets attention, especially in groups of lawyers. And let's face it, I'm a bit of a troublemaker sometimes.
John, I like you already. Amanda, I think what we need to do is like have Mostly Legal podcast shirts that say proud non-lawyer across them.
Yes.
How great would that be?
I love it.
Yeah,
for 25% of the merchandising, I'll grant it.
The show built for proud non-lawyers. There we go.
Exactly.
It's actually all the profits when we do these things go to the foundation of ALA. Yeah. So it's been a pretty
so you
cool
can
thing
still
that we've
have
been
your
able to build.
25%, but the rest of us are sending it to charity.
I'll just have to arm wrestle the foundation for it.
Exactly. So John, you mentioned business people, right? And one thing that I've often seen, and Amanda and I talk about, and it sounds like you have an opinion on, is the fact that a lot of the time attorneys struggle with business people running the business side of their firm, right? They let somebody that comes up as a paralegal sometimes in smaller firms, a receptionist, you see all these other people coming up, but when it comes to business people from the outside, they don't necessarily want them running the firm. So can you talk to us about your experience there and how a firm might overcome that?
Before I jump into that, I will say American firms, and maybe Canadian firms, but mostly firms in the U.S., have to look at the rest of the world, where in Australia and in the U.K., there has been non-lawyer ownership, forget just running, non-lawyer ownership of law firms for years. So that's coming. It's arrived already in Arizona, and I expect that probably to spread some. But all of that is to say the bygone era where the firm existed of only lawyers ended probably about 50 years ago. I mean, look, the onset of marketing people in law firms started really in the like late 1980s. But only came into real power kind of in the late 1990s. Whereas, the executive director, firm administrator positions started before that in law firms. And so in some respects, it's get with the times.
Right.
In other respects, and this is, I think, far more important, people who are making the contacts, converting the business, doing the work, and then collecting the money oftentimes end up being too close to the product to miss the forest for the trees. Mm-hmm. And so those firms that continue to have to be run only by people who have a JD are spending a lot of administrative time that is totally non-billable and without the perspective of somebody that has a business background and who, for example, are taking just basic key performance indicators and applying them to the practice of law, which has been a sacrosanct place, unlike accounting firms and environmental firms and consulting firms. Law has been sacrosanct for not being a business. Yeah. It's too prestigious to call it sales. We're going to call it business development.
Except all lawyers are sellers.
Absolutely. And so a lot of it is shades of a bygone era. And there have been numerous great books written about why that is, why we're beyond that. And the firms that are maintaining that, are just leaving their heads in the sands.
So that goes to you using the title CEO also, right?
Mm-hmm.
So there are some states, Florida included, where you cannot use the title CEO unless you are an attorney. So, I mean, what impact has that had? Like, you have a 3-person executive team, I think you've said. So how does that impact how you interact with staff and firm? And like, do you have thoughts about other states like getting with the times?
Yes. And again, I think, not to pick on Florida, but you said it. And I'm not in Florida, so I mean, they have to cross the border to get me, I guess. There are some states who have been far more protectionist about the practice of law being relegated only to lawyers, while at the same time allowing paralegals to do a bulk of the actual day-to-day work.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
You didn't hear from me, but paralegals also have specifically chosen not to go to law school.
Mm-hmm.
And many of them are extremely qualified to be doing that work, but they just can't sign it and send the final agreement in and the rest of it. And I get that. There's an ethical duty that the lawyers must have. However, I think those protectionist kinds of regimes regimes.
I'm just sitting back enjoying this.
We're going to get massacred
Preach, John,
for using
preach.
that word.
They must be in the process of evolving, or else they're about to be, dinosaurs that people are looking for their fossils. You had New York State, after Washington started it, create the legal technician, which literally meant you could do everything, including sign everything, except oral arguments in court.
Oh.
And I know New York State backed off of that. Again, that was at least 5 or 6 years ago, so that's not a new idea or concept. And so it's an exciting time in the law because change is in the air, but generationally, that change is going to have to wait a few more years.
Yeah.
So that's my take on it. I can get way more aggressive and explicit on it if you like.
No, it's my soapbox too. So I appreciate come on up and sit next to me on the soapbox. Oh
yes. And you mentioned the CEO part. And while it sounds wicked fancy, sorry, I am from Maine. In my first COO role, people were like, "Holy cow, you're a chief operating officer. That's fantastic." And I was like, "Well, I don't clean up the mess in the men's room, but I'm probably the guy to call the janitor to come clean up the mess in the men's room, as well as run the shareholder meetings and cast a vision for the firm, so to speak." And so the CEO role sounds as glamorous, maybe even more. And I will say there is a bit of a higher order, I think, on the CEO role that law firms need to get comfortable with people like me who are able to take on a role and add to the firm by demonstrating value and challenging the status quo. Mm-hmm. Heaven forbid, lawyers across the board, and Altman Weil did a great job with this. They did a study years ago that was called The Personality of the Product, where lawyers, 95% of them, their overriding personality is traditional, meaning change is the opposite of what they want. Yeah. And so, in terms of challenging the status quo, I mean, you're fighting a fight right off the bat. But in order to do that, what I feel like might be the difference between a COO or a firm administrator and a CEO is being committed to being a lifelong learner. You haven't arrived, you never will. And you are proactively doing things to educate yourself, maybe related to the practice of law, but also to increase and take your firm to the next level, whatever that looks or sounds like. And then also you're leading with a healthy dose of self-doubt. Why? Because you're working with lawyers. You don't doubt yourself.
Well, if
they
you
will
don't doubt
force
yourself, they're going to doubt you. Is that what you're
Absolutely.
saying?
And so you have to have a thick skin, right? But you're still willing to lead. The moment that you end up feeling cowed is the moment on a minor issue. I think that's about the time that you need to think, is this the right place for me?
Yeah.
And I know that sounds awful, but it is true. And I think that challenging the status quo is in direct conflict to people who say, yeah, I'm a leader, and spend most of their day trying to maintain what has been going on, keeping the peace, being not only the Band-Aid, but also, not taking the next steps to, get rid of the teletypes or the fax machines or the, dictation devices if you're talking technology.
Got it.
But then I think the most important part is demonstrating value. We all save money. I do bring in some clients that's based on relationships that I have and networking and the rest of it. But demonstrating the value is more than just kind of saving money. It's also building the firm, right. And being able to demonstrate, okay, we increased our rates, let's say by 5% last year. Our growth has to be in excess of 5%, because then we only increased it by the 5% because we got more expensive to our clients.
Right.
That's a big F, right?
Mm-hmm.
But then in addition to that, it really is, and this is, I think, where ALA and organizations like that come in, networking and leveraging those networks. Some of the money that I've been able to save Thompson Burton in terms of just costs has been because of relationships I have with ALA and especially on the business partner side. They are fundamental to how you run a law firm, and anybody who takes over the helm of any law firm comes in and is dealing with everybody else's friend, uncle, and cousins who just happen to be the people who installed the AV that is circa 1990.
Built your website.
Yeah.
Sell your insurance or your 401k provider.
Right.
Yeah. There's a time and a place. Like in the first 6 months, you're not killing everybody, right?
Yeah.
But
they called me the Axe Man usually when I come in, because I'm like,
yeah.
She replaced almost the entire tech stack in the first 6 months.
Listen, it was the first year, but we went live to the day of my 1 year anniversary on almost an entire new tech stack from the top down. Yeah, it was.
Wow.
I've done smarter things in my life.
Yeah.
Okay, so I have a question. You talked a little bit about your firm being unique. And one of the things that I've noticed is that your firm has very transparent about having an eat what you kill model. And so for people who are listening, what that means is that your attorneys are compensated primarily on what they originate and then what they work. So you eat what they kill. But firms are rarely transparent, not even just about what kind of comp model they have, but what the percentages are. You have it on your website. So can you explain what your decision about that is, the pros and cons, et cetera, et cetera?
Oh, absolutely. And I will also say, if people are unfamiliar with what their current firm's comp system is, that's on you. If you have to get out the shovel and start digging, do it. But it answers the why for what people do. And I'll leave it at that. I could go into grave detail from 25 years of experience. But when you realize the comp structure that of how your firm is set up, it really does explain the partner's behavior and situations that are difficult. Now, in terms of our structure, we are pretty open about the fact that we have a formulaic 20% originating credit, 50% working credit, and 30% goes to the firm in terms of the fee receipts that our clients pay. What that does on a number of fronts is it gives us transparency. I have the same conversation with all recruits in the same room that I can have with other partners. No one's got a special deal. There's no cloak and dagger behind the scenes. I'm lazy. I don't have to remember who's
who's getting
more
paid what on what
special than
special.
the other.
Right.
Yeah. But also internally, there is no such thing as the comp committee.
Mm-hmm.
And everybody who has a friend that has a comp committee knows what I'm talking about.
Yep.
But having sat on comp committees at other firms, and a couple of those reasons, they're the exact reasons why I left. And I'll leave it at that, since I also raffled off names. But the beauty of it is we get to be transparent in our monthly reporting.
Mm-hmm.
What people brought in terms of revenue last month is what they're getting paid this month.
Right.
So if you take a 3-week vacation, you better expect that you're going to make less the following month. It's just the way that it is. And so it doesn't attract the lawyers that I'll say it. It doesn't attract the lawyers. It's like the Shawshank Redemption, the institutionalized lawyers.
The hangers-on.
Yeah. The institutionalized lawyers who are just looking for the next work to come down the pipe.
And some of it you're able to do because you're only 13 years old.
Yeah.
Right? You're a young firm, right? Yeah.
That's right. And to your point, Amanda, for law firms that have one of the traditional compensation models, the hail and door, the meritocracy, the A units, B units, sometimes C units, those firms literally would have to get all of the equity partners together, and a majority would have to decide to change their compensation.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And that is why Thompson Burton exists,
right?
Because the other two members of my executive team, Kevin and Walt, have had those experiences at larger firms and said, "Is this it? We can do better." And sure enough, we have. And in my 3 years here, we've grown by 155%.
We'd like to take a moment to thank our sponsor, Centerbase, legal practice and management software designed to deliver optimal efficiency, profitability, and business growth for your mid-sized law firm. Learn more about how Centerbase helps you practice, manage, and grow your law firm with modern technology at centerbase.com.
Okay, Rob, I'm going to let you ask me a question, but I want to ask one just quick.
I was ready to go. You were watching me.
I know, but I want to ask one quick question. Do you charge overhead to the attorneys? I mean, this is very technical, but on that 70%, do they have to pay a portion of the overhead, and how do you determine that?
Yeah. On the 70%, absolutely not. Being a proud member of the overhead myself, that is included in the 30% that goes to the firm.
Okay.
So yeah, that's everything from malpractice to rent to me to the technology is included in that 30%. And we have to be really aggressive about keeping those costs real slim, because that 30% has to be sacrosanct. There is another firm that I'm aware of that has a similar comp structure, not in Tennessee. And in the last year, they had to increase that percentage up. And you can imagine how the partners reacted.
Well,
not well. So, John, obviously this model heavily values the origination, right? How do you cultivate new rainmakers in this environment? And how does, I call it the transparent approach to compensation, influence the way you guys do attorney development? Yeah,
great question. I do want to take minor issue with a lot of the emphasis on origination, because we do have, while our model doesn't really allow for quote unquote service partners, we do have people whose primary bread and butter is, in terms of their distribution as a K1 employee, is through the working attorney revenue. Right. We do have people who that's their primary source of dollars. That said, the 20-50 split has been enough to allow me to be able to trust that my partner is going to be able to jump in and is incentivized to do it, rather than, well, if it's 30 or 40% originating and handing it off to somebody else for a lesser percentage of working, the work just doesn't get done.
I see. So we accidentally flipped the question, right? It's not heavily weighted to origination. It's heavily weighted towards the working.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. But then, what was the other? It was a two-part question, and I love both of them because I want to get to them.
Amanda, that's what happens when I let you write the questions. Usually I do it, John. But the second part of the question was how does the way you do compensation impact and influence the way you do attorney development?
The way that the compensation happens is quite interesting because it also, we have lawyers that take on salaries of paralegals and or associates. The benefit is the training and accountability is baked in. If I'm paying your salary, I'm going to make sure that what you're doing is right.
Yeah.
As opposed to the time-honored goodwill of do the right thing for the firm. We're not going to pay you any extra, but do the right thing. I won't point fingers at firms, but what we get to do then is, because we believe that our associates are in fact the future of the firm, I train them. I do 2 trainings a year with our associates on law firm economics 101 and 201. Because I believe that the better associates we have, the better partners they're going to be when the time comes for them to understand the model and leverage it. The other portion of that that's quite practical is after an associate completes their first year as a lawyer at Thompson Burton, they are eligible to receive their 20% origination for any clients they bring on.
Wow.
Okay.
And so, leaving aside how that is comped for a second, I will say, being the business development guy at other law firms, I saw often with plenty of my friends who are associates, the first 2-3 years are go hide here, learn how to be an excellent lawyer.
Mm-hmm.
That's great. That's great. Do the best work that you can, learn the law and all the rest of it. And then, 3rd to 5th, 6th year, it's all right. Make sure that you are irreplaceable, especially with fill in the blank partners. And again, nothing wrong with that. But then 7th and 8th year associates, we take them to the woodshed because they haven't developed any clients. Well, hold on a second.
We keep telling them not to do it for the first 7 years.
That's right. For the first 7 years, they've been working 7 days a week in some respects, making sure that they're an excellent lawyer and that they're indispensable. How and when do they have time to go develop work? Mm-hmm. And by the way, they're not incentivized either, because if all of the work that they bring in is going to the nebulous partnership and they're just getting the same salary, you're taking away the financial incentive, which is the overriding reason why people want to be a law firm partner in the first place.
Switching a little bit to ALA, you mentioned ALA a few minutes ago. ALA came up with some new committees this year. And one of the new committees that we introduced was the Future Readiness Advisory Council. And it's a lot of letters to describe, what ALA is hoping we get in being future ready. And so you volunteered to chair this committee. It's brand new. So tell me a little bit about why you volunteered to chair. What do you think it means for law firms of the future?
Yeah. Simply, I've always been the guy who's too slow to step back when everybody else does. And so I find myself in leadership roles, and that's not a new thing. That started happening in like 4th grade. That said, with experience doing it, it's something that I'm passionate about because I do think the legal industry, the amount of change is going to continue to pick up. You can point to generational aspects like the baby boomers not retiring or whatever. Even if they fail to in the next 10 years, the pace of change is going to continue to accelerate with law firms because of the external pressures, whether that's from clients or business in general. As well as the students entering from law school, and so I think this is the same approach that we take at Thompson Burton. Our future is bright, mainly because we're here already, and then secondarily because we're younger than most law firms. Our average demographic age is 43 at the firm, which makes us totally different than most other traditional law firms. And so the question then that I think, as the ALA has to answer is all right, do we just want to succeed because we happen to be here and because we've successfully handed over the reins, and I think continually successfully hand over the reins to the next generation? Or do we want to do little things now that are going to make the future even brighter? Because we don't, all the decisions we make, as you guys know, as leaders, we're going to make some bad calls and we're going to make some good calls. There are some times when we'll have 18 to 24 months before we know whether a decision actually was a bad call or a good call.
I wouldn't know. I've never made a bad call, but okay.
Hold on, let me pull out the list.
Yeah, exactly.
Rob's I have a notes app on my phone of just the ones you've done today.
Exactly.
But question?
Yeah. And so I think the key is, as with any good leader, being unafraid to make decisions, but at least surround yourself with people who are a little bit smarter than you in different ways to be able to say, we got to be paying attention to this or we're missing the boat. Because by the time that becomes a bad decision, if we're totally unaware, it's a guaranteed strikeout. Right. It's no foul off. You're out. Mm-hmm. And so the Future Readiness Advisory Council is going to advise the board and other entities within ALA on what we think is hot coming up. And you know what? We've already come up with 25 issues, so it's too many.
I saw the initial list and I was like, "Oh my God, that's so much!"
Yeah, and so we quickly, and I'll hand it to Lawrence Winters, who's a fantastic guy in the vice chair. Shout out to Lawrence, hell of a guy. We were like, dude, we've got to limit this, and so we're hoping to focus on just 5. Does that mean the other 20 or so are not hot? No, they are. It just means we're going to set the groundwork for future councils to tackle. And if they totally disagree with what we thought was hot, that's fine. I think that makes ALA stronger and better. And I fully anticipate that it will make our members better educated and also able to pick their heads up out of the work day to day. Right. Anybody who does HR or accounting has to have their finger on the pulse. The technology people, I think, tend to get a little bit of a bigger vision right up until someone calls with a technology issue. And so that's the power that I think an association like ALA harnesses is like, put the devices, put the phone, put work aside to be able to focus on this, not for weeks at a time, but for a couple hours, and pick your head up and see what's coming down the road. Maybe wrong, but it may also be right. And so, yeah, you can tell I'm a little fired up about it. But
you are. I'm excited.
We love it, John.
The work is going to inform things like how we make future conferences. So, for example, if this council had been in place, when we build out our annual conference a year in advance, we probably would have had a lot more AI sessions at the conference. Mm-hmm. And so luckily we're able to be very nimble. We're going to do a pre-conference where we talk just about technology and AI. But the idea is that had this Future Readiness Council existed, they would have told us a year ago, hey, your conference has to be very heavy on this. So that's kind of like, if you're thinking how it's going to hopefully work, that's our plan.
Yeah. If I could jump in on that.
Sure.
Because one of the things that and Lawrence knows this, the council is going to find out next month. The technology is no doubt something that the future, that we've got to get ahead of, right, for the future. It's also the most comfy. And I like to make people squirm. Mm-hmm. And so we've got to go into some of the other crap that is dirty and uncomfortable, so that we're also ready. I mean, if our number one asset, and it has to be, is our human capital, then God Almighty, we've got to have other stuff than just technology in the pipeline, because our staff, our lawyers, everybody has to believe and buy into the idea that while we're doing top shelf legal work right now, and trying to make our good clients adore us, we can do better and we must improve in the future. And technology is some of that. I happen to believe it's about 20 to 25%. I think the rest of it is a little personal. And I'm fine with that. As you know, my admin team knows, we talk about the good, but we talk about the bad and the ugly a lot too. Because pretending like that doesn't exist, I think, doesn't do anybody favors.
So, John, you're a busy guy. You're doing a lot. We want to talk about one of the other things you're doing, and I think you're kind of alluding to it maybe a little bit in your answer here as well. But the Middle Tennessee chapter has started a movement called Love Jenny. Can you tell us more about it, the work you've done, and what you're going to continue doing with the cause?
Boy, I'm fired up already, and this is not going to end well. But who knows? Maybe we'll land the plane all right. So #LovedJenny is the movement. It did start with tragedy, and that's, that is hard, and it's also real, and that's why I love it. Jenny Wyatt was I won't say the firm name, but she was a senior human resource manager. She was well known in ALA International and in the Middle Tennessee ALA. She was a former president, served in a variety of roles, was a troublemaker all her own. Jenny took her own life on August 30th, 2023. Now, she left behind a husband and 3 girls under the age of 20. We as a group tried to process that for at least a couple months. And I won't get into the details of why that is. But suffice it to say, when it was all said and done, we had to look in the mirror and be honest with each other. And I'll pause right there to say, your chapter is not a nebulous group of people who are trying to drive membership. They are upfront and personal. They are your potential friends. They are absolutely, whether you like it or not, a support group. Whether that's things going really well at your firm or things going really bad at your firm or life happening. And if you cannot and will not invest in your chapter when you have a need, work-related, life-related, otherwise, that's incumbent on you. I have friends like that in MTALA and across ALA. It takes time, it takes trust, but it's worth it. Right. And so as we were talking about Jenny's passing, we felt naturally guilty. How in the world could this have happened? We have said numerous times, all of the people, no one ever would have thought it. Jenny would have taken her own life. And so we started a task force, again, too slow to step back. I am not necessarily the task force leader, but I did host it and therefore ended up kind of becoming one of the drivers. Luckily, there are way smarter people on the task force, way smarter. We started just saying, hey, look, we got to be aware of this within the chapter. We had to discuss how to break it to people, and an email wasn't going to suffice. We had very awkward and tough decisions. We started with the awareness and quickly realized something's wrong because the safety net isn't there. And what do I mean by that? Through the years, and I can't take credit for it, the Tennessee Lawyers Assistance Program, TLAP, has done presentations at the MTALA meetings and done a fantastic job in sharing what resources are available to lawyers, judges, and law students. Not me, not you, not paralegals, not file clerks. And so this seemed like an opportunity to raise a little bit of a flag and say, hey, wait a second, are we missing something here? And the answer has to be yes. We all know that people have good days and they have bad days, hopefully more good than bad. But some of the bad can be really damaging. And when somebody comes in and stuff has hit the fan, boy, I'm being diplomatic today, and doors are slamming, we all know that damage is collateral. There's no way that if the person having the issue is the lawyer, that doesn't affect the other lawyers or the staff who just happen to sit around them, have some kind of relationship with them. And so we began to realize we in Tennessee, we can do better. And yeah, for me, sure, for my family, but also for my staff. Mm-hmm. And the irony is, we as law firm executives work with people who are advocating on behalf of their clients all day long, and we don't do an excellent job all of the time of advocating for our own people. I think that's a critical part of the job, and I have failed at that. We did petition the Supreme Court of Tennessee after meeting with the Tennessee Lawyers Assistance Program executive director, who happened to be a contact that I had and a couple of other folks. And he said, hey, look, this is how it's run. This is how it's set up. The issue is going to be a funding issue, but we're having a retreat, and we've got to, you've got to put something on the table. So again, smarter people on the task force said, hey, we need to do a survey. I'm like, dude, that's a fantastic idea. How do we do that? And it was like done. I was like, wow. Again, that's why you guys are awesome. And we did some other research. We were able to come up with some pretty compelling numbers and put together a petition to the Supreme Court of Tennessee, who took it under advisement, created a committee, because what else do government entities do? And the committee talked about it, and almost a year later, we found out that the answer was no. We're not going to change the resourcing so that legal professionals, non-lawyers,
proud non-lawyers,
and families receive coverage, and that's all right. I always count failure as a bit of a blessing, because there are opportunities to learn. I commit to at least 3 battles before the war is lost. We had one, and we've got at least 2 or 3 more in us. For me, it was quite diplomatic. My email back to TLAP about it. We just completed our 2025 survey. That our 2024 survey was limited to just Middle Tennessee. Right. The 2025 survey includes the whole state, and we are going to take the Tennessee Bar Association, the National Bar Association, and then go meet with them again after we get a few of the lawyers on our side who happen to have some input with the Tennessee Supreme Court. And so we have a roadmap. Where is this all going on the ALA level? Man, I don't know. But what I do know is that it's a movement. And we all, as administrators at our firms and in our chapters, have the opportunity to make a change for the good of the whole profession. Mm-hmm. Will the lawyers do it? In 25 to 50 years that the lawyers' assistance programs have existed, they haven't. Mm-hmm. But for Mississippi and New Mexico, that's all of the Canadian provinces and all of the 50 United States, 2 states. So there's a huge opportunity for people to jump in and get involved, whether that's chapters or individual members. They can contact me. They can contact other members of the task force, and we can give them the roadmap that we've used. It's not going to necessarily work the same in each state, but we better get busy doing it now, because what we have also learned through an ALM survey is that 17% of 3,000 people who annually take that survey know one person, at least one person, also in the legal industry, who has taken their lives in the last 2 years.
It's tough.
And it's an epidemic. That is a 2% increase over 2023. So it's not slowing down. And so I think the question for the governing authority of the Lawyers Assistance Program in your jurisdiction is literally, is one life worth more than another?
That's a powerful question. And I just got an invitation from another chapter literally earlier today that their chapter's lawyer assistance program is speaking at an ALA chapter lunch. And the description says they help connect judges, lawyers, and law students with the mental health and addiction resources they need. And you're right. I think that the rest of us in the legal profession are missing. So John, I share your passion and I appreciate you sharing it with us. So I think we're out of time for today. Thank you so much for joining us. You are a wealth of knowledge, and I have about 100 more questions to ask you about the compensation model, but I will not bore the rest of our listeners with it.
Thanks for joining us today, John. It was fun.
You're welcome. Thank you so much for having me. This has been great, and I love that you guys are doing this. It's a good outlet for someone like me who can talk too much, but also I think a worthy place for people to pick up good information and chew on it.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Mostly Legal podcast. If you like what you heard, make sure you like and subscribe so you don't miss a single episode.
Stay tuned as we uncover more behind-the-scenes stories of law firms with the best minds in the business. And Rob.
Thanks.